Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's live. Today's all about how to co-regulate with a escalated student so you can help them de-escalate. So teaching students how to regulate their stress response or their fight or flight should be taught way, way more than it actually is, but a lot of adults don't even know how to do it. So it makes it tough to teach our students. That's why I created the Meet the Needs workshop series, a 4-part workshop series that teaches everything that you need to know to regulate and de-escalate your stress response in the moment and after the fact. So after whatever chaos has ensued, so that you can have a more calm and productive life in and outside of the classroom. And who doesn't want that, right? Often we can't fully enjoy our time outside of the classroom, and that's because our minds are still in the classroom. I love the phrase, be where your feet are. And that's everyone's goal, right? Is to be present in the moment as like you're watching your kid's basketball game or you're reading a book or you're doing something that you enjoy. You just want to be able to be in the moment. And if you don't have control of your stress response, if you find it hard to separate yourself from school, from the stress of school, it can influence the quality of the moments that you spend with the people that you love. So it's really hard to be in the moment if you haven't learned how to control your thoughts and your stress or your fight or flight. The Meet the Needs workshop series teaches you to get control of negative thinking, reduce your reactiveness and your fight or flight response, and understand how the stress response works so that you can reduce the amount of stress you have in your life, be more present, and be more productive while you are at work. So you aren't taking work home with you. To check out the Meet the Needs workshop series, you can comment workshop or go to teachingtoariot.com, go to the workshop series tab. It's also linked in my stories. This week we have the power of regulation, which is what this live is from. It's like a snippet of the workshop. On February 19th, 8 p.m. EST on Wednesday. Yeah. So if you want to join us, make sure to check out the workshop series. Okay, so let's talk about how to regulate with an escalated student. Whoa. See, there you are. Okay. Okay. So, how to regulate with an escalated student. The first thing I want to talk about, and then I just lost my notes. Okay, there we go. So, the number one thing you want to consider when you're co-regulating with someone who is escalated, that you are regulated yourself. A dysregulated individual cannot help regulate a brain that's escalated. So you have to be regulated. And if you are in fight or flight, you should not be de-escalating. If you are the only option, like you have no other choice, then you need to use a regulation strategy. Call them parasympathetic exercises. And you need to do that as soon as possible to get yourself regulated. If you are dysregulated and you're trying to regulate somebody else, the likelihood that it escalates and gets violent is very high. So you want to keep everybody safe. You want to keep the students safe. You want to keep yourself safe. If you cannot regulate yourself, you should step away from the situation and try to find a replacement, somebody who is a bit more regulated. Yep. But that's not always an option. If you want regulation strategies, we are going to be covering them in February 19th workshop. We also covered them in the January 21st workshop, which is more about getting control of like negative thinking and controlling the stress response, like once you get home from work. February 19th is going to be like in the moment regulation strategies. So once you have a regulation strategy and you've had it in place for a little bit, you've practiced it, and you can pull it out in the moment and effectively begin to regulate yourself, then you are ready to co-regulate with escalated students. If you have this strategy and it doesn't seem to be working, and you are you seem to not be able to de-escalate yourself or regulate yourself, you really need to pay attention to what you're thinking. A really good phrase is, what am I thinking? Wait. So you got to check your own thoughts, because a lot of the times we'll pull out these de-escalation or regulation strategies, and they'll work while we're using them. And then once we stop using them, our thoughts begin to spiral again. And you end up re-escalating yourself. You end up getting into a state of dysregulation again. And that's why last month we talked so much about controlling your negative thoughts, because automatic negative thinking, habitual negative thinking, is what's going to re-escalate you after you've used a regulation strategy. Okay? So you have to remember that an escalated brain is not in control. Whether it's your brain, it's somebody else's brain, it's a student's brain, an escalated brain is not in control. They have no access to their thinking brain. That means 99% of what you say will not be processed or retained. So if you are trying to process or talk to an escalated student, you are only going to make it worse, because it's literally just putting like audio stimuli, like you're just overloading them with sound. They're not processing what you're saying as language. If it's very, very, very simple, and that's why they say to keep demands with an escalated student, to keep demands very simple. That's because the executive functioning, the language processing centers are not working. That student is just in fight or flight. So my strategy was always, and I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but my strategy was always to be completely silent and just let the student feel what they're feeling. And I'm going to go over like how I did that, because it's like you can say it and you say, oh, I just let the student be quiet. Like, well, what did I do with all the other kids? Well, if the student started yelling, what am I just going to sit there and stay silent? Like, I'm going to cover that, and it's going to be covered very thoroughly in February 19th workshop. Okay, so an escalated student does not have access to their executive functioning. They will not process or retain, that means remember, what is being said. It might be held in their short-term memory for a little bit, but it is not going into long-term unless it's like seriously traumatic. Um, so if you're trying to lecture an escalated brain, you're wasting your time. If you're asking them a ton of questions, you're just going to irritate them. They can't process the information. They can't answer what you're asking them. That's very, very simple. And even then, like, you can ask the simplest questions to escalated students, and it'll just end up escalating them more. Because, like I said, you're just really giving them like sound stimuli that their brain has to process. And if their brain is processing this extra stimuli, it's not exerting the energy it needs to calm itself down, to regulate itself, and to get that executive functioning online. So don't try to lecture an escalated kid. Don't try to overly talk to an escalated kid. Give them space, give them silence. So the best thing that you can do for an escalated student is to try to turn their parasympathetic response on, which turns their stress response off. This can be done by reassuring the student that they're safe. So while you are talking to them, or while you are processing with them, while you're in their environment, in their line of sight, you can, if you're going to say anything, you can just reassure them that they're safe, everything is okay, that it is okay for their brain to start de-escalating. That means that the fight or flight is going to shut down, and they'll have executive functioning access. Another thing that I always did when I was de-escalating was I got smaller than the kid. And this is really important because if you're towering over, or if you have height on somebody, or on an animal, on any living being that is in fight or flight, if you are standing over them, or if you seem bigger than them, the brain is going to process that as a threat. So I always made myself smaller than the kid. A lot of the time, I would just sit on the ground. I'd give them some space, sit on the ground, not say anything at all. And then, like, if I'm ready to say something, or if I feel like the kid's kind of like breathing's a little bit more steady, I might say, "You are safe, you are loved, everything's gonna be okay." I just leave it at that. So once you notice that the student is calming down, and then you can open up space for them to verbally process what happened. So when you do this, you should be listening more than you're talking. Just because the student looks calmer, it doesn't mean that they are all the way regulated. Okay? Just because they're not huffing and puffing and cussing somebody out does not mean that the brain is regulated or not in fight or flight anymore. You saying the wrong thing could spiral them into escalation. Asking a ton of questions, like giving that brain all of this stimuli to process, can send them spiraling again. And that's because when your brain is processing a threat, right? When it's active, when the fight or flight is activated, cortisol and adrenaline are pumped into the system. And adrenaline, everybody knows that adrenaline like pumps you up. So if the brain and the body has a bunch of adrenaline in it, it can switch like that. The chemical reaction, trigger response, and it's not just going to be like a slight, "Oh, I'm irritated." It's going to be intense, And it's going to be an intense response because how much adrenaline the student has in their system from the escalation. So that's why another reason why my strategy was always to just chill, quiet, make myself small, let the kid know that they're safe, let the brain know that it's safe. Um, so because you don't want to say the wrong thing, you don't want to like pummel the kid with questions. You want to allow their brain to de-escalate naturally, reminding it safe, reminding itself it's safe. Um, and if the student does start talking, you should be listening. Um, you want to validate what the student is saying at no point in time. And this is why it's so important. It's so important for you to be regulated yourself. Because if you're more concerned with the student realizing what they did wrong, you're not regulated because you're retaliating. You feel like the student needs to be, it pretty much needs to be punished because you're irritated, you're angry, you're escalated. If you notice yourself like leaning towards trying to get the kid to admit that they did something wrong, trying to get the kid to see things from other people's perspective, those are all important, but right now is not an effective time to do that because the child has no executive functioning. So even if they did say, yeah, I see what I did wrong, their brain's not processing it really. Their brain's not pulling memories. It's not processing the memories because the only part of the brain that's working is the fight or flight response. The fight or flight and executive functioning can't be on at the same time. So when you have an escalated student, you really, really, really just need to be there for them until the brain has de-escalated. And if you find it difficult to not lecture or to not talk about how it influenced everybody else and how irritated you are and how that student hurt so and so and dot 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 dot, you need to check your own regulation. So if you're verbally processing with them, like they're talking and you're listening, and they start escalating during the verbal processing, you should be offering validation. Like, that sounds really hard. I'm sorry. I would have gotten irritated too. The validation and empathy will reinforce the feeling of safety and belonging, and this stimulates the student's parasympathetic response. And that's what you want turned on. Because if the parasympathetic response is on, the stress response is off. So to review, when you are co-regulating with an escalated student, you want to make yourself as non-threatening as possible. Make sure you are regulated yourself, reinforce that they are safe and that they belong, listen more than you talk, and validate or reassure if they begin to re-escalate. Teaching is a high-stress job, and regulation strategies are taught all the time to other professionals in high stress industries like ER doctors, surgeons, firefighters, first responders, CEOs. It's time that we start teaching these strategies to teachers. And that's why I created the Meet the Needs workshop series. It's a 4-part workshop series that includes 4 workshops that focuses on everything you need to get more in control of your stress, be able to think clearly in the moment, be able to leave the stressful situations, the drama at work, and control your thinking once you get home so that you can be in the moment, you can focus. February 19th, we'll be doing our second workshop. It's on the power of regulation, regulating yourself to help regulate your students. We will be talking about what I talked about in this live. I will give my 5 best calming strategies that stimulate that calming response, that parasympathetic nervous system. I'll be giving tips and tricks on how to teach these strategies to your students and how to co-regulate with an escalated student so that you can bring them back to calm and help them get control of their fight or flight. If you are trying to use strategies in the classroom but just can't access them when you need them, this workshop is for you. Because the reason you can't access those strategies is because you don't have access to your memory when you are in fight or flight. And so right now the workshop is linked in my stories. You can also get the workshop on my website, teachingtoariot.com. You can check out the workshop series tab, or you can comment workshop on this live and an automation will send you the message. I hope everybody has a fantastic rest of your week. And I hope to see as many of you as possible February 19th.